The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation, or MANA. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will answer in-depth questions about maritime transport and tourism. I'm Atty. Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. Mr. Roberto de Ocampo is the chairman of the board of the Philippine Veterans Bank and a founding partner of the Centennial Group International and chairman of the Centennial Asia Advisors. Chairman de Ocampo is also a recipient of the Order of the British Empire and is the chairman of the FVR Legacy Initiative and the Ramos Peace and Development Foundation. Hi, Bobby. Welcome to The Way Forward. Bobby, can you tell us what prompted you to initiate the first roundtable discussion on the blue economy?
The blue economy really is all about using our oceanic resources wisely and being able to transform that into a vital part, not only of the economy in general, but for the purpose of giving our fisher folk higher and better income and to be able to protect our environment as well.
As a former member of the cabinet of the government, what do you think are the key roles of the government and the General Appropriations Act, meaning the national budget, in enhancing and harnessing our resources in the Philippine blue economy?
Well, the first thing to remember is that this all started during the time of President Ramos. Yes, in fact, there was a piece of legislation that he promoted that comes by the acronym NIPAS, or National Integrated Protected Area Systems Act. So that embodied within our law the idea that we have to protect those resources, but at the same time bring it to the highest level of development for our economy and for our people. The way we see it, it's not just coming from the national government, although it should, of course, come with an appropriate budget from the Congress and executive branch, and the branches of the government, the different departments involved in this, should activate to the highest degree possible the implementation of that act. But beyond that, we believe that each local government must be involved in an integrated effort. That's why it's the wise use of the ocean resources, the protection of the coastal development, not only for the fact that this is an environmental goal, but it is also connected to making these areas attractive for tourism.
Where do you think the initiative should come from? Because it sounds like if it's left up to the government, it will always be political, or there would always be the risk of politicization.
At the risk of sounding biased, we didn't have this type of mental approach during the administration of President Ramos for two reasons, among others. When he came into office, I think it's 1993, we were already talking about Philippines 2000. We weren't talking about the next election. Then we gathered the Congress together very regularly in what was known as the LEDAC, or the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, and we met almost every week so that we all reach a consensus as to what the Congress could legislate that would fit into an overall agreed scheme of national vision, where you articulate where you want the country to be by a certain year.
What would be the implications financially of having this blue economy for future generations?
Well, first, it should be able to impact the poor fishermen and make their incomes higher. Because if we protect our ocean environment, there is more to fish. And if there's more to fish, then their incomes rise. Plus the natural resource to bring the level of fishing towards an industry, which will not only provide food to the population, but provides entrepreneurial opportunities for businessmen, whether small, medium, or large scale.
And on that note, what type of assistance do you think the government should provide?
Definitely, there are two things. One is to help them with respect to the modernization of their fishing capability away from bankas and outriggers to something a little more elevated. And second, as you mentioned, cold storage facilities. Now, cold storage facilities can either be a local investment by the local governments, or it could come from provincial. Then there are possibilities for the government to negotiate with foreign governments for either business partnerships or outright international financing.
So bilateral cooperation or agreements.
The whole world is interested in making sure that we don't have a shortage of overall food supply. And one of the most important sources of food supply would be the oceans themselves.
Thank you again, Bobby. It was truly a privilege to interview someone of your caliber.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your program. I've been there before, and it's an honor to be back.
Again, that was Mr. Roberto de Ocampo, and I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. And this is The Way Forward.
Welcome to the first ever roundtable discussion on the Philippine Blue Economy, jointly sponsored by the FVR Legacy Initiative and the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement. The ocean is more than just water. It's the lifeblood of the Philippines. The Philippines' ocean-based industries contribute an estimated 7% to the country's GDP, generating jobs in fisheries, aquaculture, maritime transport, tourism, and energy. These sectors sustain millions of livelihoods, but they also face growing challenges from climate change, overfishing, and pollution. A 2017 joint study by the World Bank and the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs highlights the blue economy's potential to increase long-term benefits for coastal communities. It states, the blue economy concept seeks to promote economic growth, social inclusion, and the preservation or improvement of livelihoods, while at the same time ensuring environmental sustainability of the oceans and coastal areas. The World Bank defines the blue economy as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and ecosystem health. The ASEAN Blue Economy Framework promotes innovation, sustainability, and regional cooperation, ensuring that Southeast Asia maximizes its ocean-based opportunities while protecting marine ecosystems. The Changwon Declaration reinforces the need for inclusive and resilient blue economy strategies, strengthening ocean governance, adapting to climate change, and safeguarding marine biodiversity. With the proposed Blue Economy Act, the Philippines is taking bold steps toward developing policies that will secure our marine industries, drive sustainable economic growth, and protect our oceans for future generations. Let us help build a governance structure that can balance competing interests, address plastic waste pollution of our seas, and the negative effects of climate change. Our oceans are our future. Together, let's build a sustainable blue economy, one that supports people, the planet, and prosperity.
Professor Ben Malayang III of Silliman University is an authority on archipelagic ecology whose area of competence includes fisheries and environmental policy and governance. Professor Ben, welcome to The Way Forward. What is the importance of developing our maritime environment?
The maritime environment is the very foundation for blue economy. The maritime environment constitutes the universe of all processes and materials, energy, and information that are in our sea. You know, the ocean constitutes almost 75% of the total surface of the earth. And in the Philippines, which is very archipelagic, our seas, we have about 7 times more sea area than land. We have about 220 million hectares of seas and coasts, as against only about 29.8 million hectares of land.
What is the importance of biodiversity, conservation, and development when it comes to the maritime environment?
If we are not careful and we extract more than the capacity of the ocean to replenish the population of these living things, then you will consume outright and destroy the ecosystem's balance in our oceans. The end game, the end goal of conservation is really sustainability. There are many other human interests that impinge on this ability to sustain these living resources. Many other, what I call this harmonized development agenda that kind of erode the ability of our living resources and our seas to sustain the amenities that we get from them.
Are you in favor of reclamation?
No, reclamation are being done for a particular purpose. No, I don't want to say favor or not favor because these are always sui generis. If you do this reclamation, the problem is that much of the productivity of our oceans are really based on the productivity of our shorelines. The deep waters are really the so-called deserts of the sea. The real oases of the sea are in the shorelines, the shallow shorelines. Kailangan natin mag-agree on what would be the basis for determining when something is to be done in our coasts and waters and when they should not be done, and to what extent, if at all to be done, to what extent and scale they should be done. Overall, your seas and your coasts will continue to be productive.
Do you think the DENR has sufficient authority and enough capability to make those decisions that you mentioned are crucial in terms of deciding whether certain things should be done in our coastal areas or even in our water?
I would rather look at how government can complement each other, the government capabilities, so that DPWH are able to complement with DENR, complement with DSWD, so that local communities can be involved in the decision-making process. Dapat natin pagtitingnan yung paano yung mga proseso for making collective decision on how to best utilize and harness our blue economy for the purpose of a sustainable future for the Filipinos.
Is there any person, whether it's in the legislative or executive branch, that you find is championing this cause, meaning having the right knowledge and attention when it comes to the blue economy or maritime environment?
My first take would be the National Academy of Science and Technology. They're very much aware of this. The second take is that the academic community very much aware of this, especially those like the Marine Science Institute, Silliman, and all others that are involved in marine research. And then, of course, in the legislature of the country, we have people like Senator Loren Legarda, Congressman Benetes, who are pushing on this. Most of our public investments are on land, real estate, and all that kind of thing. But there's not much corresponding investment on harnessing the blue economy of the country, like in the West Philippine Sea, and in the Pacific side of the south side of our seas. Because makikita natin that the sea is not just a place; it's a productive system. Right now, most of the perspective in terms of oceans and countries is competition over resources. Wala pa tayong nakikitang collaboration and looking at the sea and our coastal areas as a global commons rather than a place for competition.
Thank you so much, Professor Ben. It was truly educational hearing you talk about the maritime environment and our blue economy.
Thank you very much for this time.
This is Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.
The maritime transport and services sector is the backbone of global trade, connecting nations, enabling commerce, and driving economic growth. In the Philippines, our maritime industry is a key pillar of the blue economy, supporting millions of jobs, ensuring food security, and facilitating over 90% of our trade. But beyond economic benefits, this industry faces pressing challenges: aging fleets, infrastructure gaps, environmental concerns, and climate change. As of 2023, the ocean economy contributed 943.05 billion pesos to the national GDP, with maritime transport and storage accounting for 141.74 billion pesos. Passenger traffic grew by 24.4%, and cargo throughput increased by 5.14%, proving the industry's vital role in economic growth. The ASEAN Blue Economy Framework highlights the importance of sustainable shipping, digital transformation, and regional cooperation to protect marine ecosystems while boosting economic growth. This aligns with the World Bank's Blue Economy model, which promotes economic development while ensuring the sustainability of our oceans and coastal communities. The 2012 Changwon Declaration urges nations to adopt innovative solutions, green infrastructure, and proactive policies to protect marine environments while maximizing economic potential. Investing in smart ports, low-emission vessels, and resilient infrastructure will be critical to achieving these goals. The Philippines remains one of the world's top sources of seafarers, with over 578,626 deployed in 2023 alone. Strengthening training programs, fair labor policies, and technological adaptation will ensure our workforce remains competitive in the global maritime industry. The future of maritime transport lies in innovation, sustainability, and strategic cooperation. By modernizing our ports, upgrading fleets, and prioritizing green technology, we can build a resilient, efficient, and eco-friendly maritime industry that benefits both the economy and the environment. Together, let's set sail toward a smarter, greener, and more sustainable maritime future.
We now have with us Ferdinand Inacay, a transport professional with over 30 years of collective experience in the management and operations of the various modes of transport and transport facilities. Ferdy, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
What do you think is the importance of developing the maritime environment of our country and the maritime transport industry in particular?
Because, Karen, with 3 trillion trade volume going and coming through our waters, and also because the Philippines is an archipelagic country, it is really important to make sure that we develop this maritime industry in the Philippines.
At the moment, what do we need to further expand this trade volume?
I think we need to revisit our regulatory policies, that's one. Make it easier for importers and exporters to bring in and ship out cargoes into the Philippines. Permitting of ship activities, vessel operations, port operations. And if we can lessen the process, shorten the lead time, it would create a much friendlier shipping and maritime environment.
Ferdy, what about security?
In fact, we're working on a software where the NDRRMC monitoring system for tidal movements and all of that is already being put in place. Maybe we can just incorporate that system into it. So in terms of security, the Philippine Coast Guard can actually monitor movements of vessels.
We have approximately 20,000 maritime graduates annually. However, only 5,000 or around that much are absorbed. What is the issue there?
Most of those that are being recruited for hire are the ones that work in the cruise ships. They're waiters, they are entertainers, they are the room keepers. And right now, as the records state, I think what the government can do is try to ramp up maritime activity in the local business network. We need more ships in the inter-island transport system in central Philippines, which is the Visayas Mindanao area. You'd be surprised. There's been a growth of like 20% year on year on transport volume in the Visayan region, but not in Luzon or in Mindanao.
What type of support do you think it needs from the government, whether it's from the executive side or the legislative side?
We need to put in and rethink of our regulatory policies in the maritime sector. Let's make them more investor-friendly.
Are you aware if the maritime industry has been sufficiently included in the Strategic Investment Priorities Plan, or SIPP, that gives out incentives?
I believe that there is a pending bill in Congress, the Maritime Investment Development Plan, that's already on its third reading, and it embodies everything that you have mentioned.
How do current geopolitical issues affect our maritime transport industry?
Well, of course, there is constraint now in our West Philippine Sea for our fishermen. It is giving a lot of hardships to our local fishermen at this point.
Given your years of experience, what would you say is a low-hanging fruit that can be accomplished?
Probably we can also look into that model for the Philippine Ports Authority in clustering port operations for privatization, because then they can have a better attraction to potential investors, which would then redound to improvement in the operations of smaller ports and modernizing them as well.
Very helpful tips. Thank you so much, Ferdy, for your time today. We learned a lot from your expertise.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy to share what I know with the possibility of improving and upgrading our blue economy.
And again, I'm attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is the way forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a Maritime and Archipelagic Nation, or MANA. Mana natin ito. We must defend it.
Dr. Cielito Habito is an economist, a professor, and a columnist who served concurrently as Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority and as Socio-Economic Planning Secretary during the administration of President Fidel Ramos. Dr. Chel, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
For starters, as an economist, when we say that there's so much value in the blue economy, what value are we talking about?
That if you compare our blue economy resources, meaning our waters, which by the way comprise 4/5 or 80% of our total territory, compared to say 1 hectare of undeveloped land and 1 hectare equivalent of, let's say, ocean waters, there's likely to be more economic value that you can glean, you can actually derive from that same area of water in terms of fishery resources, in terms of potentials, of course, for tourism, potentials for energy generation, transport.
What is the cost of not developing our marine resources and inland waters?
I think right now we already have the lowest average income among the ASEAN 5, the 5 original ASEAN members. We used to be ahead of Indonesia. Indonesia has long overtaken us.
As someone coming from the NEDA, are they now more focused as well, not just on terrestrial resources, but also on our water and marine resources?
At least the phrase blue economy does appear in our Philippine Development Plan now, but we don't really have a blueprint for really pursuing, tapping, and taking advantage of the opportunities therein. So what this implies is that let's have a roadmap. There is legislation that, of course, first recognizes the importance of the blue economy, and for some reason it's being delayed.
Who should take the lead in preparing this roadmap?
I think it logically falls under the task of the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, being the chief planning agency of the government, to do this because they have the overview of all the sectors of the economy.
And they do prepare the Philippine
And they are
Development
tasked.
Plan.
All the plans,
that is
in fact.
a bit supposed to be long-term, right?
Usually the PDPs correspond to the term of a president. But during the time of President Ramos in the 1990s, in 1995, he actually directed NEDA, when I was heading it, to draw up a 25-year plan. We all know the problem with the Philippines, that with every change of administration, things tend to be set aside. Every new administration, whether you're talking about the national or the local governments, every leader wants to have his or her own mark. I have to confess, for example, the 25-year plan that President Ramos asked us to prepare was a forgotten document by the time the next president came in.
One of the things that is a risk here is also what we call the tragedy of the commons, because right now there's no long-term or even any type of blueprint or plan for the blue economy. So how do we prevent overfishing, environmental degradation, and even, just generally Filipino citizens taking advantage of the blue economy without taking care of the environment and then risking the value that is there?
Government regulation has to come in trying to prevent this kind of, for example, overfishing of fishing grounds. And that's really where you have to declare marine protected areas so that there will be a moratorium on fishing to allow the fishery resources to regenerate. But let me cite the reason why Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize for, essentially to prove or to establish, in fact, to debunk the tragedy of the commons by saying that if communities are allowed to work together and manage a resource, then it is unlikely that you will have the tragedy of the commons where everybody tends to overexploit the natural resource. But this bantay dagat type of mechanism is an example of that. Community-based management of the fishery resources. In forestry, the same thing applies. And so clearly that is one way. I mean, without even the government stepping in. In fact, the government's role should be to enable and to facilitate these kinds of community-driven initiatives to happen.
But when it comes to our local communities in the Philippines, unless someone steps in or at least organizes the community, it's forgotten in the day-to-day, especially if you have poor communities who worry about the basic necessities of every day.
True. And that's the reason why community leadership is very important.
What would be, do you think, are concrete next steps and realistic objectives that can be achieved in the medium term?
Well, one of the most urgent things to do is to really fix governance and institutions. The common thing that came out was the need to really have much more local government participation and community participation, and then enough of the too much top-down type of governance. We have the local government code, so we simply have to invoke and assert that. We just need to make sure everybody is working together, communicating with one another, and pursuing initiatives in unison so that we end up not stepping on each other's toes as we pursue whatever our objectives are.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chel. It was truly wonderful to hear your insights today.
It was a pleasure, Karen. Thank you.
We just concluded our conversation with Dr. Cielito Habito. I'm Atty. Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation, or MANA. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will answer in-depth questions about maritime transport and tourism. I'm Atty. Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a Maritime and Archipelagic Nation, or MANA. MANA natin ito. We must defend it.
The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation, or MANA. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will discuss the intricate trade of marine-based products and tackle the issue of energy. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is the way forward.